Alright guys, welcome back to Formula 1 news. Teams calling into question the stewarding decisions at this past weekend's Singapore Grand Prix, suggesting some inconsistencies in the rulings on Sergio Perez and Max Verstappen for Red Bull. Many surprises that Max did not get a penalty for impeding Tsunoda, exactly why this was the case, and whether the stewards are biased towards Red Bull, or whether this is just pure incompetence in terms of the inconsistency. Very much enjoyed to your thoughts in the comments below. Hit the like button if you enjoy. Subscribe if you're new as always. Now, as we saw yesterday, the expected AlphaTauri lineup next year is going to be Yuki Tsunoda and Daniel Ricciardo. I'm almost certain they want to keep Danny Ric for the commercial side. They're going to become Adidas, or they're going to become Hugo Boss Bulls Racing, whatever it's going to be called. They want Danny Ric. It makes sense. Now, Liam Lawson has surely earned a seat somewhere, and Red Bull's plan is to keep him as their reserve driver. Apparently, that's what we believe, which feels maybe not the best idea. If they keep him around one more year, he might decide, you know what, I'm out of here, Red Bull. I'm going to go to a different team. Because somebody's going to give him a chance, you would think. I would, to be honest, expect that to be at Williams, but we'll discuss that in a second. And he also is a bit of a mentality monster as well, because after he finishes the race in the points, he says, my bad, guys, it's not good enough. I basically had a bad start. And, finishes in the points, has a really good race. Also, there was a clip going around of his defense against Sergio Perez for a large time, which was really impressive driving from Liam Lawson in that defense. But still, he is a talent of the future and is doing a lot better, it's got to be said, relative to his teammate and relative to the rest of the grid than Sargent has done so far. And as Horner says, he's making a very strong case for himself, but apparently not strong enough of a case to keep him in the AlphaTauri seat for next season. Alfa Romeo apparently were looking at options quite a while ago. They've now kept Bottas and Zhou, but reportedly there were some arguments behind the scenes. They wanted to get Hülkenberg from Haas. They wanted Drugovich, who of course is Aston Martin's reserve, and will probably not get a seat on the grid next season. And this is the thing about Logan Sargent, that, according to Williams, they seem to be saying that it's his spot to lose. If he really has a terrible time from now to the end of the year and he gets worse, they probably get rid of him. But if he does okay, they kind of want to give Sargent a second year. But I'm just not sure that's the best idea with other talents, such as Lawson, out there and potentially available if Red Bull say, we can't give you a seat next season. We've only got 4. Most teams have 2. And that's why, well, in a second, we're going to discuss some of the stewarding inconsistencies involving those 2 respective teams. So at the Singapore Grand Prix, the win streak of 301 days was broken. Red Bull finally defeated and also off the podium. But in addition to all the drama around the flexible floors, the flexible wings, and whether that's going to affect them come Suzuka, Verstappen and Red Bull say that it won't. They arguably could have been starting further down the grid than they were. Eliminated both Red Bull drivers in Q2. Verstappen was P11, Perez was P13, and arguably it could have been a lot worse for Verstappen after what was a pretty bad Saturday for him. Now, also, in the race, Perez had a couple of incidents that weren't massively penalised. This was one, and we looked at this briefly yesterday. I just wanted to show you Piastri's on board because, as you guys can see here, this is when on the opening lap, Perez and Tsunoda come together. Now, maybe Tsunoda should just give Perez more room, but I will say Perez is approaching from a very acute angle with respect to how you would normally approach this corner if you wanted to go too wide. And probably Perez shouldn't go for this move because he is on the hard, Yuki's on the soft, and they get to the apex, they make contact, things fly off Yuki's car, and his race is very quickly over. And, Perez goes on to finish P8 after another disaster really from him, where he sends it down the inside ear of Alex Albon from a long way back. And again, he's approaching this corner. This is the normal line that we see. I guess this is Lawson and Albon taking. And he's just coming at it from a crazy angle, hits Albon out of the race. Now, we got a 5 seconds. Okay, Albon wasn't out of the race. He got continuing again, but he finished outside of the points, Albon, and was actually in a pretty good position to maybe get some more points to Williams. Alex Albon as well, because of the angle Perez approached from, was stuck in the wall pretty much, like at this angle here, and it took him several seconds to get going again. Whereas Perez got a 5-second penalty for that, finished 11.3 seconds ahead of Lawson and secured himself a tasty P8. There's an argument to say that the stewards should go back to giving 10-second stop-go penalties, drive-through penalties, what they used to, because they seem to just give a 5-second penalty for everything nowadays. Like clumsy incidents such as the Hamilton versus Piastri thing. This one I think was more egregious, to be honest. That's a 5-second apparently. So I'm not sure the way the stewards deal with things nowadays is great, especially when, 5 seconds isn't much if you've got plenty of laps to the ends. 5 seconds is a lot if there's a safety car. So I'm not so convinced that they do a great job at the moment, especially when we have incidents like this. So the weekend was so crazy, we didn't really get much time to dive into this, but we've got to do it now. So this was a replay, as you can see, of Tsunoda's first run in Q2 when Verstappen is on the racing line. This is after the first few corners, running down into, they're about to come up to the right-hander when the big straight is, and Verstappen doesn't get out of the way. He eventually gets out of the way to the left-hand side, which is on the racing line, and by the time he does, Yuki has had to abort the lap. I mean, it's textbook impeding, really. If we look at it from this onboard, we see Yuki coming out of the first couple of corners. He tries to go to the racing line, and by the time Max pulls to the left here, which is actually on the racing line, Yuki is now stuck in a, well, this isn't, you're going to lose so much time if you try and continue the lap here, and pretty textbook impeding, to be honest. We've seen similar incidents this season punished with a 3-place grid penalty. Now, there were other incidents for Verstappen on the day, him stopping at the end of the pit lane for 15 seconds, which arguably could have been a penalty as well, and also another impeding incident in Q1 that seemed less severe. And Max, to be honest, I thought that he was going to get a penalty, because after that he said, yeah, that wasn't good. I didn't see him because I was on the radio, and I didn't get a call that he was behind me. So it sums up my qualifying, super hectic and messy, and I think he thought he was going to get a penalty here. Now, there was also a similar incident with Logan Sargent and one of the Aston Martins. They also didn't turn up immediately to the hearing, but and then they did slightly later on, and you can be for sure that if that was Hamilton getting blocked by Verstappen, Mercedes would be turning up to the hearing to get Verstappen a 3-place pen. And look, it didn't matter in the end for the teams that won. Verstappen came from P11 to an impressive P5. If Russell hadn't crashed and if Ocon hadn't gone out, then quite possibly he ends up P7, which is where they predicted him to end up. But something like that's still an impressive drive from Verstappen on the Sunday. But if safety cars went his way, he might have even got a podium here. And that might not have happened had he got a penalty which most people feel like is deserved. They only gave him a reprimand for this, and all the other ones also got a reprimand as well. So yeah, surprising, because as they say, just prior to car 22 passing car 1, the driver of car 1 saw the car behind, moved to the left, but basically too late. The team admitted there was poor communication on their part, and reviewing a number of other impeding incidents, we've been consistent with those decisions by giving a reprimand. I'm not sure that's consistent with previous decisions, to be honest. So, and also, using the excuse that, oh yeah, we didn't tell him in time, that excuse doesn't fly. I mean, how many times have we seen so far this season? Gasly got a couple of penalties. I think he got 6 places back in Spain, and I think the guys he impeded ended up P1, P2. So it didn't even affect them anyway. Whereas in Tsunoda's case, that arguably, he did make a mistake on his second lap, but that incident arguably put him out of qualifying. And we also had, was it Charles Leclerc in Monaco, where I think he blocked Norris, didn't he? Again, bad communication from Ferrari. He got a 3-place pen. So the excuse of, oh, we didn't tell him, it doesn't really work. Now, the only reason I can see why he didn't get a penalty for this is because, as we see in the notes, it was noted that the representative of car number 2, or car number 22, sorry, that would be Logan Sargent, this is Yuki Tsunoda, chose not to attend the hearing. Interesting, no? Because, well, car 22 is belonging to AlphaTauri, the sister team of Red Bull. Very, coincidental that AlphaTauri decided not to turn up. Now, this is also an issue, I think, with, we can look at Gasly again. You guys remember back in Australia when Gasly and Ocon came together, and Gasly made a mistake, I think, on that one. Took them both out of the race. But no penalty was given, no points on his license were given, which I think would have made him have a race ban, actually, because Gasly was getting up there in terms of penalty points, because Alpine didn't, they said, oh, it was just an instance. I don't really know why this is a thing, that the stewards can't just say, yes, Yuki Tsunoda and his boys didn't turn up here, but it's clearly impeding, so we're going to penalise you. I don't see what's the issue with that. Why do they need the, the representative of the other team to arrive for them to come to what seemed like the correct decision? And obviously, AlphaTauri aren't going to go in there and try and get Max a penalty, because that's just how the politics of it work. But it feels like if the right decision is a penalty, then it really shouldn't matter, and seems to me that 90% of people that have seen this think that, well, yeah, based on previous incidents, it should have been. So I'm not really sure where they're getting this whole consistency means that it isn't. And as Brundle says, the entire paddock was surprised, and he reckons that including the team and the driver, he reckons that, I confidently predict that the people that are surprised this wasn't a penalty includes Red Bull and Max. That Tsunoda's AlphaTauri team didn't send a representative, albeit as the junior Red Bull team, was a sporting disappointment to me. And even there was this discussion from Aston Martin and from other members of the paddock, really, and other teams, that they just want to see more consistency here. The stewards have all the information. From our side, when you've been impeded, it's frustrating. What we really want is some consistency. So I guess this is the question people are now asking. Is this just incompetence from the stewards? Because let's not forget, every weekend they have like a different set of stewards. Like they have different race directors. They split that between different guys. The stewards aren't always the same. Naturally, you're going to get some inconsistency, which isn't good. And the teams, all they want is inconsistency. There are some people that say that this is just blatant Red Bull favoritism. And to be fair, you look at the incidents this weekend and you can see why people would think that. Now, in the past, when Max was causing a lot of questionable incidents when he first came into the sport, there was probably a feeling from the stewards of, oh, Max has done it again, let's give him another penalty. I think that happened for some time. Nowadays, it almost feels the other way around, where Red Bull, they do seem to get away with stuff. I don't know if this is just inconsistency and it's just the biases will even out over time or whatever. But yeah, Red Bull this weekend were in an interesting spot. I don't know if the stewards thought, oh, well, they should be P1, P2 because they always are, and they're PLF and P13, so we'll let them get away with it. I don't really know, but still, as Tomo says, this is why having a sister team is just a bit unfair. I mean, compared to the other teams that don't have this, like Mercedes and Williams, Mercedes Aston Martin, Mercedes McLaren, like they don't have, maybe Mercedes Williams to a very small degree, but it's definitely not the same relationship with Red Bull AlphaTauri. And I think it does undermine the competitive integrity of the sport, and it just raises more questions, to be honest. So yeah, definitely tweet your thoughts on this in the comments section below, because Red Bull are dominating things anyway, and it didn't matter in this weekend. Max didn't get a podium, Perez got back to P8, but still, questionable decisions that have raised questions by teams as to whether that's bias or whether it's just, frankly, incompetence, which is more like what it seems like to me, but I don't really know. Now, Red Bull will almost certainly win the Constructors this weekend if pretty much all they've got to do is beat Mercedes by 1 point or more, which they should do, assuming they're back to form, and if they do that, they'll win the Constructors here in Suzuka. Just before we close out, Albert Fabrega, I don't know where he's getting this from, he's come up with some simulations for Suzuka. Teams performance simulations for Suzuka: Red Bull, Ferrari, McLaren, Mercedes, Aston, Alpine, Haas, Williams, Alfa Romeo, AlphaTauri. Now, let's not forget, by the way, I don't think I mentioned it last week, but he also tweeted the same thing for Singapore. Predictions based on the simulator. Now, what simulator is this? You know what I mean? Like, the teams have their own sim with their own car, but what simulations are covered up with this? Because last week's numbers for Singapore said that all the cars were going to be within 1.2 seconds of each other, and it was going to be Red Bull, McLaren, Ferrari, Mercedes, Aston, pretty much the same list as we have here, but with McLaren and Ferrari swapped around. You guys can compare the two. It's basically the same thing, isn't it? With just those two swapped. And of course, as it turned out in Singapore, the AlphaTauri was actually pretty good. The Red Bull was not very good. And, the Ferrari was the best car. So it wasn't really a great analysis from the simulator, right? So I'm not sure I really fully believe that these simulations are going to be correct either. On paper, this is correct, but it was on paper, should be probably about right last week, and it wasn't. So, yeah, Red Bull should be back to form, although Ferrari are bringing a new floor for the SF23 in Suzuka to try and continue their positive momentum. So it does seem like they could be the big challenger to Red Bull in the upcoming races, if there is going to be a challenger at all, and they're certainly a challenger to getting P2 off Mercedes in the Constructors. And Russell did not help the boys out with that lap 62 incident last weekend. So very much intrigued to your thoughts in the comments below. Hit the like button if you enjoyed. Subscribe if you're new as always. Getting loads of new subs over the last few days. Really appreciate it. Take care of yourselves, and I'll see you next time.